So as a follow-up to the video I posted last month, the review of my 7.3 liter F-250, I figured it was only fitting that I make a video of my other personal vehicle, which is this 2010 Ford F-150 XLT SuperCrew. And just off the bat, I know it may not be, to some people anyway, it may not be as exciting as a 7.3 ZF6 F-250, but this truck has too much sentimental value to me, as do a lot of the things I own, but this truck especially. It's got too much sentimental value, and it's just too clean. It's too much of a peach to not make a video on and tell the story behind it. So this is going to be a review on my second personal truck. If you're wondering why I have two personal vehicles, and both pickup trucks at that, the F-150 here is more of a weekend date night vehicle, I guess, so to speak. I use this truck specifically for road trips and you know, going out to nice events, and I tried not to keep it dirty if I can help it. And then the F-250 over here is more of my around town farm truck, tow truck, you know, parts getter, heavy hauler unit that I, you know, bought specifically to beat on. And like I said, this F-150 has too much sentimental value and is honestly just way too nice for what it is. Now, I've shown this truck in a few of my previous videos over the last couple years. It's been in the family going on 13 years now, and I took ownership of it at the beginning of last year. My uncle, who I was very close with, passed away in January of last year, and this was his personal vehicle that he ordered brand new, or I should say he spec'd it out brand new. And when he passed away, I did not want to let this truck go to a different family. I didn't want to just sell it, so I decided to take ownership of it. It replaced my, it sort of kind of replaced my 2000 F-150 that was starting to get long in the tooth at that point. But for the first few months that I had the red truck, I was keeping my old F-150 around to use as the tow rig, you know, before I bought the 7.3 here. But this, ever since I've owned it, or I should say for as long as I've owned it, it has been my intention to keep this as the nice truck, the weekend truck, the clean, you know, not beater vehicle, just as a way of paying tribute to my uncle who owned it. Now, he purchased this truck in the summer of 2010. This body style here, this is what I guess you would call the 12th generation F-150. These were made from 2009 to 2014, and this was the last generation to use a steel body before they came out with the aluminum body. Like I said, my uncle purchased this truck in summer of 2010, and he bought it as a replacement for his 2008 F-250 Super Duty with the 6.4 liter Powerstroke, which, I mean, it's common knowledge at this point that those were basically junk. They were not one of Ford's better trucks. And he had bought that truck to pull his race car trailer, which, you know, didn't last very long. He eventually sold the race car and all of his equipment, so he no longer had a need for such a large truck. So then he traded that 6.4 in on this particular truck here, and he went to the local dealer to spec out, you know, an F-150 to his liking, and it just so happened that the dealership had one on the lot that was spec'd out pretty much exactly the way he wanted. So he wrote him a check, left the F-250 there on their lot, and drove this thing home. If you knew my uncle, he was very, very particular about keeping his vehicles clean and tidy, and he was always on top of maintenance. I mean, he would cut the maintenance intervals in half. He was always, you know, tuning them up, keeping them serviced, and he would wash and wax his trucks pretty much every weekend. He drove a Peterbilt tri-axle dump truck for a living. That was his main work truck during the week. I've got plenty of videos of that up on my channel. Go check them out. And then this was the truck that he would come home to and drive, you know, out to go get dinner weeknights, or would drive out to the racetracks. You know, we'd hop in on a Friday night or Saturday night and drive a couple hours and go watch sprint cars or modifieds race out here in Pennsylvania, or up, you know, in North Jersey, or Central Jersey, I should say. And he was an avid dirt track fan, so this, you know, this truck spent a lot of Saturday nights at the local dirt tracks, and you know, we rode a lot of miles in this thing. And I feel that this truck is a very strong representation of who my uncle was, and I aim to keep it that way. So that's the reason why this is used as my, you know, nice vehicle and not necessarily the beater. I know most guys are probably cringing, saying, "Oh, you know, you should be using this as the beater and, you know, saving the Super Duty over there." But I bought that one to work, and, you know, my uncle would probably roll over in his grave if I did anything to really beat on this truck. So I'm keeping this one clean. Like I said, we used to take this thing to the racetracks on Friday and Saturday nights, back when, you know, he was alive, my grandfather was alive, and a lot more of their racing friends were alive. You see this truck is a SuperCrew. It's a full crew cab. He was not typically a fan of crew cab trucks, but when he ordered this truck, he did that so he could drive, you know, my grandfather and all their friends out to the races. So, and eventually, you know, when I got old enough, I started tagging along with him. So, you know, on a Friday or Saturday night, we would pack that crew cab full, and he'd be driving. My grandfather would be in the passenger seat, and then I'd be in the back seat there, crammed between two of their friends. And, you know, sadly, you know, 3 of the 5 guys that used to ride together are now gone. So, now, this being a 2010 model year, was the last of the Triton series of engines before they replaced them with, well, I guess you could say replaced them with the EcoBoost engines for the F-150s. So the 2009 and 2010 model years were a little bit different than the later 2011 through 2014 models in some regards, the engine choices being one of those differences. And this being a very late 2010 is actually one of the last F-150s to leave the factory with a 5.4 liter Triton engine. Now, I know I probably just lost a couple viewers upon saying that, but not to worry. By the time that this generation had come out, I think it's safe to say that Ford had most of the quirks figured out with the Triton engines. In the 97 to 03 and the 04 to 08 generations, they had their share of issues between the spark plug threads stripping out, and then on the later ones, the spark plugs breaking off, and the intake and exhaust manifolds leaking, and the cam phasers going bad. I mean, they've definitely had their share of issues. I know the 5.4 leaves a sore spot on some people's butts, but like I said, by the end of production, I think they had figured most of the kinks out. And this truck, luckily, I think escaped most of those troubles. My uncle also happened to be a big fan of the color red, so naturally his pickup truck had to be red as well. This truck has a two-tone paint job, as you can see. It is candy red metallic, or red candy metallic, as some people call it, and silver ingot metallic, you know, on the door panels. And it really helps to offset the red. I think it actually looks really, really sharp. It also has the chrome 18-inch alloy XLT wheels. These are very popular. They were a very popular option. You see these on a lot of trucks. You know, in my opinion, you really shouldn't have too much chrome on a pickup truck, because at the end of the day, these are designed to work. But I think for this truck, we can make an exception. And it also has the chrome wheel well trim, as you can see, which is in pretty nice shape. It also adds a nice little accent. The truck is running Cooper Evolution tires. These were brand new right before I acquired the truck. My uncle, like I said, was very religious when it came to maintenance, and actually in the couple months leading up to his passing, he had done quite a bit of work to this truck when it had reached the 100,000 mile mark. So when I had started driving it, it had just turned 100,000 miles, and he had kind of gone over it and did a 100,000 mile service, which included new spark plugs and coils, fresh coolant, oil change, new tires, new brakes, and just a good once over. Like I said, he was very, very particular about keeping this truck maintained. And you know, him being an old race car driver back in the day with his lead foot, he was known to, you know, move pretty fast around town and on the highways with this thing. His foot was pretty much always to the floor, but he kept up on the maintenance. So this truck was rode hard, but it was also very well taken care of. So I guess you could say they balance out. This truck has the medium flint interior, which is a modest interior. Like I said before, being an XLT, it's nothing fancy, just like my F-250 over there. Just enough bells and whistles for what he needed, and honestly, it's more than enough bells and whistles for what I need. You can see it has the basic gauge package. It does not have the bigger LED display that the 2011 through 2014 models had. The 2010 or 2009 and 2010 models had a couple of distinct differences between the later model years in this generation, and the screen display was one of them. Another thing that somebody pointed out to me is kind of unusual about this truck is that it has the column shifter. It has a center console, but it also has the column shifter here as opposed to the shifter, you know, on the console. I can't say that I've ever seen another truck from this generation with this particular shifter, so I don't know if that's just a, you know, early in the generation, you know, 2009 to 2010 thing or what. But like I said, I've never seen another one set up that way. So if anybody has one of these trucks with the column shifter and a center console, I'd be curious to know. You know, got the leather wrap steering wheel, and the thing I really like about it is you can see kind of where it's worn in from where his hands sat, because he only ever drove with his left hand. And it's, you know, just a little wear and tear like that. You'll also see that there is a little bit of wear on this seat here from, you know, my uncle climbing in and out of it all those years. And it's the little things like that that, you know, make me proud to own this truck. I may someday put some seat covers on this thing, but I do not plan to swap out the original seats. It's just, you know, growing up riding in that back seat now, it's pretty cool to be able to drive this truck and have the same view that my uncle had. And like I said, as I've said before several times, he was very particular about keeping his trucks clean, so the interior was just about spotless. He was also known to carry a dust rag with him at all times, so he was constantly wiping his dashboard clean. He could not stand the sight of dust, so I try and, you know, keep it up to that same standard. I try and keep it clean and free of dust when I can. It may actually need another cleaning here now that I'm looking at it, but I'm trying, Uncle Sam. I'm really trying. You'll see up there on the dash that I left his original Cobra fuzz buster mounted. You know, he always liked to put one of those little fuzz busters in each of his trucks, and I'm trying to leave this truck as well preserved as I can, so I try to leave everything just the way he had it. So the fuzz buster still works, I just leave it plugged in, and it is kind of handy to have, I will admit. It's just, you know, it's those little touches, like I said, with the steering wheel and the seat that remind me of him. The only thing that I have changed on this truck since I've owned it was I installed, kind of like in my other trucks, I installed a Duha underseat storage tray to store some extra tools and whatnot. Not that I ever, you know, really plan to do any work with this truck, but it's always handy to have, you know, extra set of jumper cables, some tools here and there, and a couple sets of ratchet straps. I'm telling you guys, this underseat storage tray is a really, really good investment, especially if you're like me and you're not a fan of toolboxes that go in the bed. So highly recommend it if you have one of these trucks, especially a crew cab or extended cab. Here's just a quick view of the back. You can see, I mean, I've tried to keep the carpet spotless, and I kept the original floor mats in it. Those are also spotless. And you can see, I mean, you know, he's had his share of riders in the back seat over the years, but the seats are still basically like new. Not sure how well you can see it there, but this truck has just over 112,000 miles. And like I said, when I started driving it, it had just turned 100,000, so I've put right around 12,000 miles on it in the time that I've had it. And actually, since I bought the 7.3 and I've been using that one to do a lot of work, this truck has been sitting for a good portion of the last year, which is honestly okay with me, because I've been trying to keep the miles off of it. But like I said, I'm trying to preserve it as best as I can. The truck does not have too many bells and whistles, but it does have Ford Sync, which my uncle never used because he was old school. Part of the Sync is it has built-in Sirius radio and Bluetooth, and I do use the Bluetooth quite frequently because I can't stand listening to the radio. It does have the center console, and I've voiced my opinion on those before. I do not believe that trucks should have center consoles. I believe that they should all have a jump seat or at least a bench seat in the middle, but for, you know, originality purposes, I am not going to be changing this out. I'm just going to leave it as is. Got a couple little tools, some gloves in there, and, you know, nothing fancy. This truck does have power adjust seats. It's, you know, more than I need, but it's one of those nice little features to have. It also has power adjust mirrors. My uncle never towed with this truck, so it does not have tow mirrors. I think the tow mirrors look a little goofy on a half-ton, so I will not be changing those out. You'll also notice that it has the built-in LED turn signals, which are kind of a nice touch. I do plan to eventually put a set of those, you know, tow mirrors with the LED turn signals on the Super Duty over there. You'll see that this truck has the shift-on-the-fly electronic four-wheel drive. Now, I try not to keep this truck, or I try not to take this truck out in the salt or in the mud, so I very rarely have had to use that. I think maybe once or twice in 12,000 miles. It's not like the manual floor shift that my F-250 has. It has the vacuum-powered hubs, so, you know, that over time is more that can go wrong. So like I said, I try not to use four-wheel drive if I can help it, but then again, this truck really only ever sees time on the road. So I really try hard not to get it dirty. Here's a view of the interior from the other side, from the passenger seat. He had these WeatherTech plastic floor mats put in a few years ago, and in my opinion, these are a very worthwhile investment. They're just better than the rubber floor mats, in my opinion, and I do plan to put a set of those in the F-250 eventually. They're American made, and they are very high quality. They do a nice job of capturing dirt and debris, especially in a truck like this with a carpet floor that I'm trying so hard to keep clean. So if you don't have a set of those WeatherTech floor mats, highly recommend them. A view of the passenger side from the back seat. One thing Ford has always been very good about with these SuperCrew trucks is the amount of space they put in the cabs. Now, granted, this passenger seat is slid back a little far, but I've heard a lot of people praise Ford for making such a spacious cab. That's certainly one thing that they did right with these trucks. And it's honestly, you know, this truck has been a great people mover. I've had this cab full. My uncle has had this cab full of people, and it's really nice to have that extra space. I can see why so many people are running them around now. Even my my next door neighbor's 2022 F-150 over there with the extended cab, that's got a ton of space in the back. It's got far more space than my F-250 extended cab, that's for sure. So Ford has always been very good with making a spacious cab, no doubt about it. Coming around to the back, you will see that it has the optional bedside steps. I don't know that my uncle ever used these. I don't think he spec'd this truck out with them. I think that this truck had already been built and these were already on it at the time, so he just left them on there. Coming around to the back, you will see the dual tailpipes. This truck has a Magnaflow single in dual out exhaust system with a 14-inch oval muffler. I don't know the Magnaflow kit number offhand, but that kit has been on this truck since it was basically new, so I have no memory of this truck ever being quiet or having the stock exhaust on it. My uncle liked to make noise, he liked to go fast, so he put this kit on it, and it's been on it basically since the truck was new. Looking at the bed, you know, nothing fancy. It's got the 6.5 foot bed. I personally am not a fan of short beds. I believe that all pickup trucks should have long beds, because the 6.5 foot beds are sort of kind of useless in my opinion. But again, this is my uncle's truck. It's a half-ton crew cab. You can't get a half-ton crew cab with a long bed, so you know, this will have to do. And I'm not really hauling much with this truck. I've hauled a couple of garden tractors with it in the past year, but as far as like an actual work truck, I would never use one with a short bed like this. It would have to be an 8-foot bed. You'll also see that it came with a factory plastic drop-in bed liner. I'm not the biggest fan of the plastic bed liners, only because they tend to hold water. The cure for that is to just every couple of years, you know, pop the screws out, take the bed liner out, and you know, clean out the underside, because sometimes they trap water, they trap leaves and whatnot, and that can cause your bed to rust out. So that reminds me, I'm actually due to pull this bed liner out and clean out underneath it. But like I said, this truck has really just been used as a personal vehicle and as a car and a people mover. It hasn't really done a whole lot of truck related work in its life. So what I'm thinking of doing is actually putting a bed cover on it just to protect the bed, because my uncle even talked about it when he was still alive. He was planning to at one point put a bed cover on this thing, because he really wasn't even hauling anything with it either. Every once in a while he would haul some lumber or, you know, something small, but I think the bed cover would make a nice little touch, and it might help to improve the mileage. Not that not that pickup truck mileage really matters, but it would make a nice little touch. So that may be on the list for the future. I'm not 100% sure. One thing I want to highlight with this truck, I'm not sure how well you can see it on the camera, but the frame on this thing is just about spotless. I mean, this truck is absolutely immaculate underneath. There may be a couple little hints of rust, like along the bed rails, which is, you know, the first place that they tend to rust out. Considering the truck is 10 plus years old and it's got over 100,000 miles, that's to be expected. But you can see the paint is still in really, really nice shape. And my uncle, like I said, was very, very careful about driving this in the salt and in the mud. That's definitely one of the highlights of owning this truck, is that it's just so rust-free. There is, you know, the frame is still practically like new, and underneath it's just spotless. So for that reason, I am doing the best I can to keep it out of the elements. Another view from this side, you can see again how clean and rust-free the frame really is. And there's a close-up of the Magnaflow muffler. You will notice that it has been welded and patched a couple times. Just, you know, I guess that's to be expected. The tailpipes rust out at the joints, and I had a local exhaust shop just cut some new pieces of pipe and weld them in there. So if they break again, I'll just, you know, do the same thing. It's kind of, you know, when you have a rear exit exhaust system like that, it's to be expected, I would say. This particular truck has the 355 rear axle ratio, which is not really ideal for towing, so to say. but that's all right, because this truck, you know, he never ordered this truck with the intentions of towing. I have pulled a couple of loads with it when I had my old landscape trailer, and I also pulled my new trailer home with it before I bought the 7.3. But I refuse to do any heavy towing with this truck because that would just be sacrilegious. Like I said, this thing was really just used as a people mover. As a matter of fact, I actually just recently changed the fluid in the rear axle. I was noticing a bit of a vibration in the driveline on takeoff, and a couple years ago, my uncle, when he was still alive, he reported that he was getting a vibration in the driveline pretty similar, and it turned out that it had wore out the U-joints on the original drive shaft, so he did put a new drive shaft in it, and that seemed to have cured the problem. And then, you know, once I started driving the truck, I put 8,000 or 10,000 miles on it, and it was doing the same thing again. So what would happen was when the wheel was turned just slightly to the left or right and I was taking off from a stop, I would get a vibration, and it turns out that it was actually the clutch packs for the limited slipping. So all that took was a fluid change and flush, and we put some conditioner in the rear axle, and that seemed to take care of it. And I have to put a couple hundred more miles on it yet just to really get the vibration to go away, but it's definitely a lot smoother and quieter than it was before. So, and I just through reading on some forums and talking to some other F-150 owners, it seems to be a pretty common issue with these trucks. So if you have an F-150 like this with a 355 rear, limited slip 355 rear, and you're getting a vibration on takeoff, you may want to look into changing the fluid in the rear axle. It's never a bad step to take. Now, before I pop the hood and show you the engine, I just want to point one little thing out here real quick. You will notice on the front grille emblem here, the Ford logo, there is a dent down here at the bottom. Typically on a truck this pristine, I would go through the trouble of replacing the emblem with a nicer one without the dent, but this dent actually occurred just about a year ago, the night that the EF3 tornado had hit my parents' house in New Jersey. At the time, I did not have my 7.3 yet, so I was mostly just daily driving this truck, and we got the call that my parents' house had been hit. So my girlfriend and I jumped in this truck and flew down to New Jersey, and at that point, you know, we were driving through the remnants of a hurricane, so there were torrential downpours, there was about 8 inches of water on the road. You know, bridges had washed out. I mean, it was a nightmare trying to get home, make the hour-and-a-half drive home. It turned into about a 4-hour drive, and we were in this truck at the time, and at some point during that drive, something bounced up and hit this emblem and put that dent in it, and it just acts, to me, it acts as a reminder of that night and how this truck got us home, or got us back to New Jersey safely despite all the adverse weather. So I think I'm actually just going to leave that there. I think it acts as a nice little reminder. This is probably the part of the video where I lose most people's interest, but nonetheless, here's the engine. Again, 5.4 liter Triton 3-valve V8. It's a 330 cubic inch V8, and I know these 5.4 liter Triton engines developed a pretty bad reputation over the years. The earlier 3-valve engines in the 04 to 08 generation were notorious for cam phaser failure, timing chain failure, exhaust and intake manifold leaks, and who could forget the notorious 2-piece spark plugs that would break off inside the head. Pretty piss poor design on Ford's part, there's no doubt about that, which is why I would have preferred to skip right over that generation. The 04 to 08s are not one of my favorite Ford trucks, that's for sure. But those earlier engines were built at the Windsor, Ontario, Canada plant. These later Triton engines were built at the Romeo, Michigan plant up until pretty much the end of their production, as far as I know. This being a 2010 model year, you know, one of the very late Triton powered models. This is a Romeo-built engine, so at this point in their production, they had fixed most of the issues that these engines were known for. They did away with the cam phasers, and overall, I think these are just a lot more reliable. And another thing to note is that on these 12th generation trucks, the engine is not pushed quite as far back onto the firewall as with the earlier generations. So everything is fairly accessible and, for the most part, easy to work on. Like I said before, when this truck turned 100,000 miles, my uncle went through it and did, you know, he took care of all the basic maintenance, you know, changed the oil and filter, obviously, changed the serpentine belt. He also changed the spark plugs and coils, so that's all taken care of, and changed the coolant as well. Although, looking back at it, I may have to pull the degas bottle out and just flush it out because it's got this residue from, I guess, a couple years of running different mixes of 50/50 antifreeze. So I'll clean that out here at some point. But other than that, I mean, this engine is very, very healthy. These 5.4s were also known for exhaust manifold leaks, you know, the infamous Triton tick. This truck, though, for, you know, I guess just because my uncle was he paid such close attention to it. He made sure to keep the manifolds sealed up. He had a mechanic friend that had a little trick for keeping those manifolds sealed without having to pull them off. So at 112,000 miles, this truck does not have any exhaust leaks whatsoever. And aside from the loud exhaust, the engine itself is actually very quiet. So this thing's got a lot of life left in it, and it sure runs, no doubt about it. I think it's got just about as much power as the 2-valve engine that was in my old F-150, my 2000. It's just, like I said before, the big difference in pulling power, or I guess the get up and go, is the gearing, 6-speed versus 4. So without further ado, let's get this thing fired up. Like I said, I know the 5.4 is not everybody's favorite engine, but just wait till you hear this thing's exhaust note. You might change your mind. Like I said, she is actually pretty quiet, aside from the Magnaflow exhaust. No Triton exhaust manifold tick whatsoever. And this thing runs really, really well, I gotta say. So, don't discount all the 5.4s until you've had a chance to run one of these later ones. A little maintenance goes a long way, it really does. One thing I ought to mention, just kind of reading through the recommended service interval book that is in the glove box there. Ford recommends a 7,500 mile oil change interval on these trucks, and in my opinion, that's just way too long to go between oil changes. I don't care how good your oil is. I really don't think there is any kind of engine oil out there that's good for 7,500 miles in between changes, especially on a little engine like this. Now, on a piece of industrial or agricultural equipment, or like a semi-tractor or something like that, it's a different story. But on a light car and truck engine, like a 5.4, you really should be changing your oil more frequently than that. 3,000 to 4,000 miles is enough. A lot of the issues people had with these engines, related to the cam phasers and the timing chains going bad, was because they didn't change the oil frequently enough, and it would create a lot of sludge buildup. That's honestly what a lot of these issues boil down to. So, and unfortunately, a lot of people, were following the recommended service intervals, but this is one of those cases where you probably shouldn't go by the recommendation. So I try and change the oil in this truck every 3,500 to 4,000 miles if I can. That's the key to keeping the engine from building up a lot of sludge and whatnot. Now again, this being a late 5.4 does not have cam phasers, but it is still going to have the timing chain in it, obviously. So I'm trying to keep that oil as clean as I can and change it as frequently as I can. It's just a good preventative step to take. Okay, so in the 7.3 driving video, I think I made the mistake of not opening the back window there. Instead, I had the side windows down. But this truck with the exhaust that it has on it, I want you guys to be able to hear it instead of just hearing a bunch of wind noise. So I'm actually going to put the driver and passenger windows up, and we'll let you guys hear the exhaust through the back window there. So just like we did last time, let's take her for a quick spin around the block. You can really hear how this thing sounds. slow drivers are my favorite. Let's go 25 miles an hour in a 45 because why not? Sounds coming through for you guys. I guess we'll find out later when I'm going to edit this video. Down near the tailpipes out back so you can really hear it. really should be doing that on a piece of flat ground, but out here in Lancaster County, that's next to impossible to find. But you can hear how quiet that exhaust note is even in the cab. There's just a little bit of drone, but it's pretty tolerable, I would say. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. Like I said, I know it's just another F-150. It's probably not too exciting for some of you guys compared to a 7.3 Super Duty, but I always say you can't put a price on sentimental value, and it's truly an honor to be able to own and take care of this truck that my late uncle owned and took such good care of. And with any luck, I hope to make it last forever and keep it looking just as good as he did. I'm trying, Uncle Sam, I really am. But I hope you guys liked the video, and I mean, who wouldn't like the sound of a V8 flying down the road? But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them down below, and I'd be glad to answer them. And you'll probably be seeing this in more videos. I mean, like I said, this isn't really my work truck, so this isn't the one that I'm going to be towing equipment to shows and stuff with. That's going to be, you know, the responsibility of this truck here. But right now, I have no plans to sell either of these trucks unless hell really freezes over. But I'm going to keep this one running for many, many years to come and keep my uncle happy. So, thanks for watching, guys, and have a good one.